Hello, everyone, and welcome to Vtuber Talk. I'm your host, Jay, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. For those of you who haven't been here before, Vtuber Talk is designed after classic late-night talk shows. Everything here is live, casual, and the goal is to simply have fun conversations that will entertain people who are already familiar with the guest while still being accessible for new fans. Please welcome my guest for this evening, Wiwi, or Wiwi, or We Tweet Stuff. There's been a bit of a change recently.
That's true.
Now, so you'd been Sleepy Riri until about a week ago. That this is actually very, very recent, but people had actually been calling you Wiwi for some time. So this is a change in terms of branding, although it's not necessarily a shocking one.
Nah, yeah, it's whatever they gave me. It's so funny. I when I was working towards partner, I was like, oh wow, like if I do hit it, I should start thinking about things that I could do once I partner. And one of them was a name change. And I was speaking to a colleague, and she was like, oh man, like, well, what would you even want to change your name to? And I already know the person who just has Riri flat out. She's a wonderful artist, lovely person, super kind. We're great friends. And I don't know if some of you may know, the original guy who has Sleepy is an Overwatch streamer, so I couldn't have either of those. So I was like, well, dang it. Like, what do I do? And I was looking for all the short names. Like, oh, like this sounds terrible.
The shorter the name, the fewer the characters, that just searchability, and also it just looks really clean.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that works perfect. And I saw that somebody owned the account, and I'm like, I don't know if they're gonna give it to me. So I sent the message, and they were like, yeah, man, sure, you can have it. Who cares? I was like, oh wow, really? Was that easy?
Yeah. That might be actually the first instance of someone reaching out saying, hey, can I have your handle? That there's been plenty of instances I've seen it where there is a clearly inactive handle that people are able to just claim, because usually if you're partnered, that Twitch is going to be pretty quick about it if it hasn't seen any activity within like 2 years or something. But that if there is activity, even Twitch, even for partners, is not going to kick someone off of an active handle. But props to you for actually thinking to reach out, and I'm really glad that it all worked out. And then for Twitter, which frankly, usually that's the more difficult one to get an actual handle change on at all. So good on you on figuring out how to make it happen, period. But also the new one, that's very slick. That's just especially hopping off of the Nintendo Wii of, we would like to play, we tweet stuff is very, very good.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was so scary because I was trying to think of a name, and I have Twitter Blue because I edit my own stuff, and I'm like, well, I'll be damned if Elon cuts down the quality of my content, so I pay for it. And I changed my profile name, like the one everyone sees, but I didn't change my username, and I forgot to change it at the same time. And for those of you who don't have Twitter Blue, if you make a change, they have to verify you're a real person. So once you make the change, they put you in timeout for a little bit to make sure you're real, and that's like 3 days. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't change it. And then I got put in timeout. So I was like worried someone's gonna take my name. But yeah, it all worked out. It was really cool. Thank you.
I remember, so I don't have Blue, but for a while, I, as many folks did, changed my display name to say that I was live. And it actually would let me without putting me in jail, but it would end up having me do captchas, and sometimes it would be 1, and sometimes it would be 12.
Ugh.
And eventually I just sort of stopped, and I've actually noticed a lot fewer people doing go live as their Twitter handle and everything, and it's so difficult to actually tell metrics-wise how much, if at all, stuff like that actually helped. But, such is the nature of the algorithm.
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah, you'd be surprised. It's, for me, as a creator, I've always told myself, like, whatever I can do to get people to come in without being intrusive, obviously, right? Like if I can get you to watch the stream through this that's what I want, right? Because especially when you're fighting for partner, like every number matters. And even for me, who's I'm not a numbers focused person at all. I don't really care. But when you're hitting partner, you have to care. So little things like that, like one guy could come into the stream for something like that. So I'm like, I gotta do all that
stuff. If it's a zero cost thing, you might as well try. And that, unless there is actual resistance or some type of thing that actually costs or otherwise inhibits you. And while changing your Twitter display name used to be effectively free, now it comes with a non-zero amount of hassle, and due to that, you just see people doing it a lot less.
Yep. You're absolutely right. It's funny, with all the changes made to protect ourselves from bots, things like that usually wind up happening less. And then the irony is, then the bots happen more.
The bots really haven't
Yep. Nope. I have gotten worse.
At all. It's
Yep.
I can respect the sentiment of, all right, let's try things to reduce bots, but at the same time, I don't feel like the things that have been tried are necessarily the most efficient, but that's an entire other kettle of fish. We're here to talk about you, not the shortcomings of a very particular social media platform that we are all regrettably stuck with because there's nothing better. Someday, something will eventually overtake it. It's not going to be an overnight process, and goodness knows today is not that day. But, hey there, like you mentioned, you didn't necessarily see yourself as a content creator. This was not particularly planned, shall we say, but you wound up here, and that, well, you got the funny purple check mark, so you're doing something right, buddy.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess that's my metric, I guess, you know?
And you have a lot of very different interests, and ones that, frankly, are a bit rarer, I'd say, in the VTuber space. And some of that comes with it. You have a background, actually, in competitive gaming. And what I find super amusing is the fact that, you do have some competitive experience in first-person shooter games, Overwatch, Apex, Valorant, but that the one that is sort of the crown jewel, the highest achieving one that you've had, is actually Pokemon Unite.
Yeah. It's true.
Had you been super big in MOBAs before you played Unite, or was that your first?
No. That was my first MOBA ever. The only reason I even considered it is because I didn't have any beef towards MOBA. I had never played them, so I can't hate them, right? But I'm a big Pokemon guy, and they were like, hey, there's going to be a Pokemon-related MOBA, and I'm like, well, that's what's going to get me to play one.
That was exactly the design. It was meant to get the folks who aren't necessarily going to play the other MOBAs and be, in some ways, sort of an entry point to the genre that I've not played it myself, but just with the cursory glances I've had, that it very much seems like, I don't necessarily want to say an introduction to the genre, but that it is meant to be a more accessible entry in the genre than most of the other big MOBAs, that systemically and mechanically, it's a lot simpler. And that's something that I think Pokemon has tried to do across the board, that they want to make their games accessible. They know that their target demographic is going to skew relatively young compared to other games, and therefore they want to make sure that it's something that somebody who's 7, 8, 9, 10 can play. And are 7 through 10-year-olds necessarily going to be high ranking in something like Pokemon Unite? But no, but they can actually play it, whereas if they tried to play something like League or Dota, that they're probably not necessarily going to actually be able to have a good time, period.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you say that. The statement about potentially 7, 8, or 9-year-olds, right, playing the game but not necessarily being at the highest rank, it made me laugh, only because, like, you would think that. And then, like, I've been called some really nasty names by some people on Ladder who sound like they're 12.
Well,
or like,
hey, in my defense, I said not necessarily, not that I said it was impossible.
Right, yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's a couple out there. There's some nasty 9-year-olds out there, man. Those guys are sick.
It's always been that way. That doesn't matter if it's now on MOBAs or if it's back in 2007 on Xbox Live. There are some kids who have very colorful language and know words that I'm a little concerned that they know. But again, that's a whole other topic. For you, as someone who had already enjoyed Pokemon, but hadn't necessarily gotten into a competitive or a high-level competitive mindset with, mainline Pokemon games, what was it about Unite that really clicked with you, especially as someone who hadn't actually played MOBAs before?
Yeah, it's a weird thing, and I always feel weird saying it because it comes off a certain way, but I genuinely mean it when I say this. I mean, I think that I've been playing video games for a long time and at a high level because, like I have to, right? At one point it was my job. So I like to think to some degree I'm good at some stuff, but with that, like Pokemon Unite, that really just clicked. It wasn't like, I have to be blunt because I'll be honest, like obviously when things happen in life, sometimes they're out of passion. I did love this game, but it just kind of happened because it all clicked together and I wound up just being really good. That's just what happened. Yeah.
The guy's a natural.
I was, apparently. I didn't think I was. And then that's when they came up to me. They're like, wow, you're like insane. Like that's when the org came up to me and they're like, we'd like to have you. And I was like, I am? Really? I had no idea I was.
Now, so you just said that they came up to you. For the folks who aren't necessarily familiar with your professional path, Which was that what was that organization again?
Yeah, Eastern Media GG. I have not. I'm not sure if they're still current, but at the time, I was a face cam streamer before I was a VTuber, and they had caught me as I was moving over to be a VTuber. It's funny, they wound up deciding to sign me to the org as I was transitioning to a VTuber, and as I was transitioning content, going through a whole bunch of change. They were like, "We like you." And originally I was not on for Pokemon Unite. They were just like, "Oh, we like your content, you know, Apex player. Let's bring this guy on." And then the game came out while I was with the org, and they're like, "We need a team." And then I was like, "Hey."
Okay, so you were already part of the organization, and they decided that they wanted to stand up a team for this game, and you happened to be particularly adept at it. You were not necessarily recruited specifically for that game, but for your broader abilities as a gamer.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I was a content creator with those guys first, and the game came out, and they mentioned they were looking for a team, and I'm competitive, and I didn't necessarily at the time believe I was pro level, but I was like, yeah, I'm pretty good, haha. Like, you know, if you want to take a shot, then I'd love to be there. And then they were like, yeah, we'd love to. And then the rest is history.
You are.
Yeah.
Have you tried playing any other MOBAs since starting that? You know, if you can do that one well, have you tried to see if those skills translate?
I think, how do I properly articulate myself here? I have tried to play League a couple times. I have friends that play League still to this day, Dota, Smite, etc. And I remember when I retired, I was like, wow, Pokemon Unite taught me that I really do like MOBAs. I'd love to get more into this. Even though I'm not playing professionally anymore, I still want to, you know, play the occasional casual game of League. So I did. And then I was like, after a couple hours of League or Smite or Dota, I was like, man, like, I don't know if I could
just not
do
the same.
this. Like, I liked it, and like it kind of came to me to some degree. Like, obviously League is not Unite, etc. Like, there are many things that are different.
Yeah.
But I was
naturally.
like, yeah, I was looking at the scape of things. I was in the middle of a game, and I'm like, do I want to play this game? I was like, I don't think I do, so I just didn't play it. Yeah, but I don't hate them. I just, you know, other things occupy me now.
And that just, you know, Unite hit that blend for you. That did.
Yeah.
Do you think it was something particular about the mechanics that was it being a bit more streamlined, something that really appealed, or do you think it may have just simply been the fact that you love Pokemon?
I think it's the Pokemon thing that's for sure. I also, for me personally, for being honest, I'm a big sensory person. If something feels wrong, or if it like if the shirt's got the wrong quality, I'm like, oh, I hate this shirt, I won't wear it. And for me, that was League, right? Like, I have no beef with League, the game, or the players, but the controls, the everything, the binds, I was like, this just feels weird. And I was like, oh, you know, you'll get used to it if you play it. I'm like, yeah, do I want to? Like, you'll get used to wearing the wrong shoe size for 2 years if you keep wearing it, but do you want to? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense in that it's really cool that you were able to actually find something like that really did click, because it's obviously a big genre when it comes to competitive games, but also just the fact that you were then able to actually connect with a franchise that you had already enjoyed for some number of years prior to that, and then really have it be something that you were able to put your skills toward and have it be something that helped you grow as a content creator, as a competitive gamer, that even though you're not competing on Unite actively at this time, that's a really cool chapter. That's a really cool moment for everything to sort of come together like that. And that, do you feel that your time playing Unite, how much of it sort of parlayed into your VTubing content versus it just becoming necessarily sort of the chapter before it, which in perhaps indirect ways may have still helped out, but do you think that it ended up having a significant impact on VTubing for you?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think, I don't even know if I shouldn't say the word negative. It had an impact on me. I think I'll leave it at that. There was a crossroads, right, where we're coming off the high of our latest tournament, like all this good stuff is happening for Unite, and then at the same time, like, I'm growing as a VTuber. And then, you know, of course, because those things interjected so much, I wound up streaming Unite, or streaming practices when I was supposed to just stream and do whatever, right? And I think the way it impacted me was I realized, like, oh my God, like, I love both these things, but I don't know if I can do both of these things full time. So I think the impact was, it made me realize, well, I think I have a choice to make.
Well, that's still in its own way good that the fact that you recognize that there was a choice to be made as opposed to sort of brute forcing both at the same time and potentially burning out in the process.
Yeah, that's what I was worried about. I didn't want to try to, because, there's practice, we're playing the game for 8 hours a day. And then I'm a creator, so I'm making my own YouTube videos. I'm like, if I just keep this cycle up, I'm going to be exhausted of both these things. I don't want that,
Yeah, that's genuinely, for any content creator, something that I think is a very important and very exciting moment, frankly, that in some cases there is a bittersweet element to it. But I think if someone is able to have that realization before they hit burnout and say, oh, I'm noticing this, I'm self-aware, I'm realizing that something's not right, and that I'm going to sort of be introspective, figure out my situation, and take steps to make it right, even if it means having to drop something that you perhaps really enjoy, but that you're mindful enough to actually make those decisions and be aware that there's a decision to be made in the first place, because there's so many people that are incredibly talented and incredibly passionate that just miss the signs sometimes, and that it results in them burning out, and that goodness knows there have been some incredible content creators that have just wound up in the headspace where content is, if not traumatic, that deeply unfun because they weren't able to see the signs in time. So I'm glad that you were.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big thing for me. It's always super sad to see a colleague, decide they need a break or hiatus, and of course I respect it, right? But it's always sad to see, because I feel like, truthfully, a lot of the things that make us burnt out or exhausted, or man, I don't want to do this anymore, etc., right? Like, a lot of those things I feel like can be aided or assisted or even wiped away completely by doing things a certain way, understanding when something isn't healthy, understanding what's good for your content, what's bad, what's good for you as a person. A lot of people are so like, oh my God, I have to get this view count, or I have to get this sub, or this video has to come out, or da-da-da-da. They forget to ask themselves, like, how do you feel about this, man? Like, are you tired? Are you having fun? And then one day when you neglect it long enough, you're like, wow, I'm not. And then some people quit,
Yeah. And that, like we said, you were able to figure that out, and you've moved on to, well, very different things. That you still play Pokemon a fair bit. Not Unite necessarily, but the various other entries in the franchise. But the games you've started getting into more recently are systemically very, very different. That you're really into some gacha games, and some of those you play just on your own time. Others are ones that you're going to be playing on stream, that actually, right after this show, you have a ZZZ stream, which is Zenless Zone Zero, the latest addition to the Hoyoverse verse. And that's actually only a week or so old, right?
Yeah, it's super new. People have been getting on it immediately. It's not their third game. As crazy as it sounds, I would say it's their third, air quotes, big success. So people are like, oh man, this is the next part of the journey. So everyone's decided to play that one, or at least if you've already been playing the Hoyoverse games. Yeah,
it's frankly terrifying how big Hoyoverse has gotten so quickly, because Genshin, I'm blanking on the names of the mobile games they did prior to Genshin Impact. That there was Honkai Impact. It was like Honkai Impact Third something or other. I distinctly remember it was a mobile game. I remember seeing some ads for it, and it was, marginally successful. Wasn't necessarily taking the Western market by storm, but it was definitely a solid entry in the genre, and that it obviously made enough money to fund this little thing called Genshin Impact, and then it was all over. Like, I do not know if I've seen, I don't know if I've seen a launch the scale of Genshin Impacts for what felt like a new IP. That I don't know if you can technically call it a completely new IP, since it had Honkai and the previous things, but that it was such a paradigm shift to go into a proper a PC title, as opposed to what was at those points only mobile titles, and that it just hit the ground running so fast. The character designs obviously clicked with a lot of folks, and then they parlayed it into Honkai Star Rail, and now into Zenless Zone Zero. And just anytime I go to a convention, the number of Hoyoverse cosplays that I see, the number of people that I see posting about new characters when a new banner gets announced, that it's gotten really, really big.
Yeah. It's honestly, it's so like I don't know, Hoyoverse is not a perfect company, but for me, as someone who's interested in this kind of stuff, and gaming in general, it's like wow, it's like a masterclass on what you're supposed to do. I'll give them credit, especially I think genuinely what also helped, if we're being honest, was the pandemic. They had a great business plan, a great game, a great everything in general, but then on top of that, we were all stuck at home.
Yeah. That said, you know, there's been plenty of other free-to-play gotcha games over the years, and goodness knows there were others that came out during the pandemic. So for me, I'm sort of an outsider on this, that I've never really been into gotcha games. It's not a judgment thing. I don't stick my nose up at the genre, certainly. That I'm actually, if anything, a free-to-play sympathizer, that I see the free-to-play market and say, obviously there are predatory methods that I do not like. But on the whole of there's some people that don't necessarily have a ton of expendable income. So the fact that there is now this subset of games that people don't have to pay for, that if you want to just grind it out, have a good time, you don't need to pay a penny, and that the whales, for lack of a better term, subsidize that, and that you're able to have a sustainable game, you're able to have developers be well paid and balance that while still having a game that even someone with not a lot of spending money can really enjoy. That the fact that, before free-to-play games, you needed the basic investment, even on the cheap end, of probably $300. That, let's assume you're going for a Nintendo console, which usually would be around $250, and then $50 for one game, and that's your baseline required investment. And people don't necessarily have that money, especially if they're younger, and that now we have that, and it's really, really cool because it means people get into games. And naturally, there are some free-to-play mechanics and tactics that I do not think are ethical, and I'm not familiar enough with Genshin's monetization strategy to know where they necessarily fall on that spectrum. But I also feel like most of, I hate saying the market, but I feel like most gamers have gotten relatively wise to the more predatory aspects of free-to-play, and by and large reject the more predatory systems. So therefore, I'm led to believe that what Genshin and the Hoyoverse at large has is at least relatively fair.
Yeah, for sure. I think that definitely, I'll be the first person to come out and say it. I think that for me with games like Pokemon or like Hoyoverse games, I think it's very important to mention things that are negative or not so good, right? Sure. As opposed to always saying, oh yeah, this franchise is great all the time. I think it's super important to also voice when, hey, that's not cool, or that's predatory, or etc., right? And Hoyoverse absolutely does do some stuff like that, and that does frustrate me. But I think as a people we have grown, thank God. I think as a people we have grown. They've changed as a company, and most gacha games, thank God, have changed to some degree, and we are learning ourselves. So I do think there are some not so great things, but I think as a people we've, thank God, moved past it. I hope so.
Yeah. And that just certainly the character designs, the gameplay seems to click. Is there something in particular that really got you when it came to the Hoyoverse at large?
Oh, yeah. I think, oh, God. You mentioned about free to play. I think the first thing that got me is I think I grew up super poor, and like sometimes there would be opportunities for me not to have a game or a console or whatever. Of course, I never was frustrated to my parents about it. I totally got the situation, but sometimes, when you're poor, you just miss out on stuff. And the idea that anybody with any kind of device that has internet, like you could have one broken iPad in your house, you can still be the best Genshin player ever. That's so nice to me. I really appreciate that anybody can, play any way they want. It's really nice. Yeah, that was a big thing for sure.
Do you have any favorite characters? I know that this is potentially, I try not to ask the controversial statements here on VTuber Talk, but, do you have a best boy or best girl?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'd say if we're talking Genshin Impact, I'd say Mona was really cool. Love that character to death. As for ZZZ, it's funny enough, there's a bunch of, usually when a gacha game comes out or a game has characters, everyone wants or likes the most rare one. Like, oh my God, I got this one. There's a 0.1% chance. ZZZ just came out and there's a couple 5 stars, but I'm really enjoying Nicole, which is ironically enough a free character you just get when you turn the game on. So that's kind of cool, actually. It's really nice.
Yeah, that's a really good win. And that's something that it seems logical that companies would probably put at least a couple of very coveted characters as just those standard unlocks, because that's helping get people in the door. And that just getting your install numbers up, getting people into the game, feeling like they're having a good time, that's naturally going to lead to hopefully more people, you know, monetizing, spending and whatnot. So it ends up being a win-win as long as, you know, as always, balance and whatnot. But I'm not shocked to hear that they put a pretty coveted character. And as someone who isn't actually familiar, I just, you know, looked up Nicole ZZZ. And yeah, that's the one that's in a lot of the promo material that I actually just, even before this show, I was looking up something completely unrelated on YouTube. And the top thing was a promoted thing for ZZZ with Nicole.
There you go.
So
yeah,
with them being still so new that I'm guessing they're gonna have a lot of different marketing spend over the next month or so.
Oh yeah, I was laughing about it to a friend the other day in a Discord call, and ZZZ, no game is perfect, right? No game is perfect, but ZZZ has had so much quality dumped into it, and I'm like, wow, this is really good. And I thought about how really good it was, and then I said to myself, yeah, it's really good because you guys have been paying that company millions of dollars for a lot
of money.
I'm like, it better be.
has been making a lot of money over the past couple of years, and so naturally it's going to be something that they, you know, hopefully, rightfully, and seem to be reinvesting in the game, and you know, that's just good business. So glad to see it.
I really am.
So, what is the genre or sort of core mechanic of this one? Because for Genshin Impact, that it was a open world, semi Breath of the Wild type of game. For Honkai Star Rail, it's turn-based with teams. I know both of those have a lot of lore going on. I'm assuming just sort of baseline that Hoyoverse games seem to really be built on their lore. But what is the gameplay mechanic for ZZZ?
Super story driven, super lore driven. In terms of mechanics, I can go on about it all day, but I'll try and keep it short. I think my favorite thing about ZZZ is, for short answer, hack and slash, right? You know, you're beating up enemies, doing cool stuff, right? You know.
Okay, so we're back into real-time combat. Yeah,
exactly that. Yep, there you go. I think it's really cool because the developer spent a lot of time also, which maybe people don't know, it depends on who's playing the game. They put a lot of fighting game mechanics like nestled right underneath the little simple hack and slash stuff. So on paper, it's like, oh, I'm playing this game and I'm mashing two buttons, haha, I'm having a good time. But like when you really delve into it, like, I don't know, for example, the character I just mentioned has like 18 different inputs for their triangle, all inputs that you would have to put in a fighting game, like a low overhead or a command grab, etc., blah, blah, blah. And that's just so cool to me that they decided to like layer that underneath the basic hack and slash. So whether you're like a 10-year-old who's just playing on their iPad or whether you're trying to be a sweaty person for YouTube, you can do both. That's cool.
So it's sounding sort of akin to Dynasty Warriors almost?
I've not played Dynasty Warriors.
Is it large numbers of enemies that you cut down with the occasional big boss, or is it smaller numbers of enemies that have higher health and stronger abilities?
I'd say medium number of enemies with occasional big boss. That's probably the perfect way to put it. Yeah.
Okay, so sort of mixed. Dynasty Warriors is the one where you have just tons and tons and tons of mobs, and that you have the very satisfying feeling of, okay, I just did this giant AoE slash and just mowed down 20 things.
Yeah, they made a oh god, I feel so bad, my friends are gonna kill me because they're all Zelda fans. There is a Legend of Zelda game that's similar to that. I don't forget the
Hyrule Warriors, and
thank you.
It is a collaboration with Dynasty Warriors. It's built on the Dynasty Warriors engine.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I've seen my friends who are huge Zelda fanatics. I like Zelda, but like for Pokemon, to me, that's their game, right? So I've watched them play it. I'm like, wow, that looks neat. I like violence in video game. Maybe I should try that.
Yeah, it is. Like I said, I'm not really someone who's clicked a lot with gacha, but that I have to say, I see a lot of friends playing the different Hoyoverse things, and they seem to be having a good time. And there's that temptation. It's like, oh man, am I gonna actually, finally get into a gacha game? Oh dear, is this gonna be dangerous? I don't know.
Oh man, I think there's, how do I put it? I think the most dangerous thing about gacha games are really like not just gacha games, a lot of games do this, is the time sink factor.
Yeah.
The money part is obviously dangerous, but if you take care of yourself, make sure
I'm much more thinking about the time sink factor than the money factor.
Yeah.
That I know myself well enough that money and spend is not going to be a risk factor for me. It's going to be okay. How much time do I end up spending grinding and doing other things?
It's true, because if you're really truly into games like that, not even just like gacha games in general, I think it's probably obscure to say, but a great example probably is Destiny, right? Like games where I'm going to sit down at this desk and we're going to play for at least 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
And it's like, do you have the time for that? And if you do have the time for it, how many games do you want to play like that? Because God forbid you have 6 of them, that's your whole day. Yeah.
I've been getting a bit more free time recently, and I'm at the point of trying to decide, okay, what do I want to spend that time on? And I want it to be a game, and that I've been leaning toward FF14 because I have a lot of friends that play FF14, and I know I'd be able to hop on with folks and they'd be able to help me get through different things. I wouldn't be getting into deep raiding or trying to buy a house. I'd be playing for the story to get through the main campaigns. That would be my level of engagement. And it's, do I want to do something like that, or would I want to get into one of the Hoyoverse games? I've been considering picking up the Yakuza franchise, which would just keep me occupied for a good while. Yeah, it's been the finalists, so to speak, are FF14 and Yakuza at this point, and I'm gonna figure it out. But it's been a minute since I just lost myself in a really good game, and it's almost ironic that right now I'm having analysis paralysis because I know I'll be spending a good amount of time, so I want to at least spend a bit of that time considering what I want to spend time on.
Right, exactly. I know the feeling. The only reason I'm not into FF is because I had an issue with my Square Enix account, yada yada yada. But like those guys are super cool. All my friends are FF14 players. And I think that genuinely, that's the one thing I look for as well, right? When you're getting into a game for the first time, is the game itself fun, but also how does the community treat people in general, specifically new people? And if it's a game where people are toxic or not as comfortable, it's like, well, I don't want to. But FF14, everyone that I've met who plays FF14 has been such a kind soul, so willing to help. And I think if you do choose that route, you'll genuinely find a community one way or another. Everyone's so nice.
Yeah. Definitely not worried about that.
Yeah.
Are there any franchises that you haven't gotten into that you want to try and get into, even if not necessarily today, but that you've been eyeing, was like, man, when I get the time, I want to play that?
Ooh, I think that for me, it's the Metroid series. Really anything Metroid. I only say that because when I was a kid, I have a lot of catching up to do as an adult. Because when I was a kid, I only bought Pokemon games. We would only have a certain amount of money to buy games every year, and my parents were like, all right, which one do you want to choose? And I would go Pokemon every time. So I missed out on like a lot of Mario or Zelda, etc. And I've caught up with every other franchise except for Metroid. I really want to see why those games are so beloved, why they have such a big fan base. I'm curious. So that's probably my first answer for sure.
Dang, now you've added one of my lists. Now that I think about it, that's one of the ones that I have missed out on as well. That I played Pokemon, like you said, Zelda, Mario. But I remember I had the Metroid Prime demo cartridge for the DS because it came packaged in with the original DS. And it was fun. It didn't necessarily... It wasn't necessarily a standout for me, but obviously then Metroid Prime came out later and has become a incredibly beloved series, and we just finally had the proper announcement confirmation of Metroid Prime 4, and now is probably the time, okay, if I want to actually catch up on that franchise, play through the first 3 games in time to be able to experience 4, that maybe that's it.
Yeah, that was it for me too. I've always had some sort of desire, but like, see, I think it was Dread, and then it was Prime 4. I was like, oh my god, everyone's freaking out about this. There's a video somewhere of a guy in the New York City Nintendo store watching the Direct, and then Metroid comes on the screen and he just passes out. He's so excited, and I'm like,
I love watching like Direct or game announcement reactions. It's very, very fun.
They're so good. I was so excited. It's funny, I was excited for them. I'm like, I know how games like Pokemon and like etc. make me feel. I love those games to death. And like for someone to be so excited about the next Metroid game that they literally pass out in public, I'm like, I'm gonna play this. Surely it has to be good. Right. No way.
No, I think the biggest one I remember is when they first announced FF7 Remake. There was, I think it was game trailers had, this was back in the heyday of E3, and that they had the big news desk set up for folks sitting at a table and everything. And one of the guys like climbs up on his chair like a child with just the amount of excitement before they even announced it, that just seeing certain signs and being like, no, couldn't be this. No, it's not. It's not. And the things that this fully grown adult man in a suit, knowing that he was being broadcast, he was reduced to just absolute childlike glee. And it was just really cool to see that you look and say, okay, in some ways, is that cringe? It's like, no, the guy is so freaking happy that he's just losing himself in the best way.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's truthfully, that's part of the reason why I love video games. Like, to be able to draw that emotion of somebody, to mean so much to somebody, etc. Not even just the games I like, the games anybody likes. Even if I hate a game, I'm sure there's somebody out there that a game I despise, like, that's their whole life. That brings them so much joy. It's just cool to me to see one thing on the earth bring so many people such, I don't know, such a positive emotion,
Yeah. It's just, it's always really exciting. And actually, scrolling back on your timeline, that your top 3 from the most recent Nintendo Direct was Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, actual Legend of Zelda, finally, after all these years, proper Legend of Zelda.
True.
Or are we going to be forced to call it Legend of Link because everything? Super Mario Party Jamboree and Mario and Luigi Brothership were the 3 that really caught your eye.
Yes, sir. Those are bangers. I love those. I think for me, Mario Party's always been great. Love Mario Party. Zelda's new. I'm new to the Zelda franchise. I didn't start playing Zelda games or caring about them until Breath of the Wild, and I loved it. And I was like, whoa, I gotta get more of this. So I started playing all those Zelda games. But for me, I also, it's funny enough, I had not played a single Mario-based RPG at all. None of them. Not Paper Mario, not the Brother games, not even RPG. And I played Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, and I'll be honest, most of the times I'm the kind of creator who plays things that he loves. Like, I'll just play the games I care about. That was probably one of the few times in my life I'm like, well, I'll play that because it's trending. So I bought it, funny enough, and I was like, whoa, this is amazing. So I'm really excited to see what they do in the other veins of RPG for Mario, because that was a blast.
Yeah, and the first Mario RPG game I played was, I think it was Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga for the Game Boy. Game Boy Advance. Played some of the DS ones. I actually never played Thousand Year Door myself. And
that's good.
I know that it is considered essentially the pinnacle of Mario RPGs. And that maybe it'll be one that I get to, but it is part of that ever-growing list. We live in such a wonderful era of games that for every title that you are able to cross off your list, about 5 more are added. And embarrassment of riches. But I know a lot of folks that were just similarly freaking out, crying, sobbing when they announced the Thousand Year Door remake.
Yeah, it's people were waiting for a long time, and it's really nice. Like, I think Thousand Year Door is the kind of game where it's like, I think to some degree, like, for example, we brought it up earlier, Genshin Impact, right? There's a little bit of FOMO and a little bit of, darn, I missed out, because, like, yes, you can still play Genshin from the beginning, but, like, there's so many important moments as a franchise, like, the first time Venti came out and we fought this character. Paper Mario and other games like that aren't live service games, the beauty is you can figure out when to play Paper Mario 20 years later. You can turn on your Switch 20 years from now and experience a banger. You got time.
Yep. Are there any games that you want to see remade? Ones that, if you got that Thousand Year Door treatment, that you would just be screaming, sobbing, going crazy?
Yeah, I think, God, one of my favorite memories from my childhood was I had gotten the GameCube late because my parents needed the cash. Like everyone else had gotten their GameCube, and I was like, oh man, I was all bummed out because everyone else had theirs. And I didn't know, I had no idea that Pokemon Coliseum was coming. I don't know, I was a kid, I wasn't paying attention. I had my little Pokemon on the Game Boy, I didn't care. But my parents knew I really wanted the GameCube. And they had got me the, like, Pokemon Coliseum, like game special edition GameCube with the game, and that like those games, Coliseum and XG, changed my life. So, and they're probably not going to get remakes because they happened like 20 years ago and they didn't sell well. And you know how Nintendo does when a game doesn't sell well, they kind of bring it out of the pasture. But
I mean, did Thousand Year Door sell well?
Thousand Year Door, you know, I actually don't know. I genuinely don't, because the original came out in 2004, and I did not play the original, nor do I know anything about it. So maybe maybe Thousand Year Door didn't sell well either. Maybe it broke the curse. So if that's the case, maybe I'm next.
I want to look that up. Very
yeah, I actually don't know how well it sold at all.
Because it feels similar that back in the day, the Mario RPGs were much more niche than they are now, and even now they're a little bit niche.
Yeah. They absolutely are.
I would be very interested in getting either new Coliseum or remade Coliseum. It being Gen 3, it means it's right before we get the actual physical special split, which fundamentally changes which Pokemon are usable and so many different things. And the fact that it was really the only double battle game that we've ever had.
Yeah, absolutely. For so long, we didn't get like. That's also why, I could rant about this forever, but that's also why Blueberry Academy, or the DLC for the recent Pokemon games, got some praise. And it was very cool to me because it was genuinely the first time, you're right, since those Coliseum XD days where we got like, oh my god, like this is just double battles. That's it, the end. That's cool to me.
Yeah, and what's funny is that's the competitive format. It has been the competitive format really since the inception of the modern Pokemon high-level play. So the fact that the competitive format is so wildly neglected in the mainline games is kind of baffling.
Yeah, I actually play competitively myself. I'm not nowhere near as good as I am at, I don't know, other Pokemon games, but I do play VGC competitively myself, so I'm really interested in battle mechanics and double battles, and I'm like, oh, they never bring these back. What the heck? Yeah, it's so wild to me, and Nintendo, how do I put this? Game Freak and Pokemon specifically, I like to say that they make decisions that nobody is happy about. Because some developers make decisions just for money, right? Like they'll do things like, oh, like, yep, this is it. We want to get $1 out of you. That's it. The end, straight up. And then other developers will do things just for the passion of the game. Like, yeah, I love my game. I want to succeed. I want people to be happy. Therefore, I'm making this decision. Nintendo, or at least specifically Game Freak, doesn't do either of those things. So the decisions like that, like ignoring double battles or pretending shiny Pokemon don't exist, like they don't make decisions that are good for the company or their bottom line. So I'm like, why do you? Yeah, I'm always confused by stuff like that.
So Mario Thousand Year Door sold 1.91 million copies worldwide. Coliseum sold 2.41 million copies worldwide. And was the best-selling RPG on the GameCube. So by pure metrics alone, Coliseum should be getting a remake before Thousand Year Door by just dollars and cents. And obviously that's not necessarily going to be the same because Mario is being produced by Nintendo and Coliseum is going to be the Pokemon company. And goodness knows they probably have a lot of other things they could remake. But in terms of viability threshold of, okay, is this something that has sold back in the day on its initial release enough units to justify any sort of eventual remake using Thousand Year Door as that benchmark? The answer is yes.
Yeah, that's huge. And that's like, it's funny. I had a moment like this. I think it was early this year when they announced Legends EA, whenever that was. I keep forgetting.
Oh, I'm so excited for Legends. I loved Arceus. I loved Legends Arceus.
So good. What a great game. And I talk about Pokemon a lot. I used to have a podcast specifically about Pokemon. But I love it. I talk about it all the time. And I was telling my chat, I was like, guys, listen, they're not going to do this. They're not going to do that. Like, calm down. This isn't happening in this game. Da, 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 da. And one of the things I was talking about was I was like, guys, like Megas aren't coming back. I was like, relax. Like, it's not happening. I know we all love Megas, but let that hurt go. They're not coming back. And then at the end of the trailer, I see the Mega symbol, and I'm like, oh no. So it was probably like one of the first big times as a Pokemon creator, like I've genuinely just been straight up proven wrong. And I was telling my channel, I was like, guys, I am always happy to be wrong, because if I'm wrong, that means Pokemon's doing the right thing. And that was one of those moments. So I feel like this is one of those moments where I'm bringing it up because I'm like, I'm happy that I'm wrong, because I'm like, oh, good, that means I have more of a chance.
Yeah, just Arceus was such a fun game that I talked earlier about wanting to get lost in the game. I got lost in Legends Arceus. Holy cow. That was one of those where just I would sit down and oops, there goes 8 hours. It was so fun. It was so easy to just, all right, I know that I'm supposed to head this way, and oh, well, I see this Pokemon I haven't caught before, so I'm gonna just, take this little detour and go this way, and ooh, what's that little structure over there? And then hour and a half later, oh yeah, there was that thing that I was supposed to be doing, huh?
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that somebody else had that experience, and I guess a lot of people did. As a whole, because that's just how I play games like that, like exactly what you said. They'll tell me, oh, go meet the warden over there by the tree.
And eventually, that if I don't have an in-game timer telling me I need to do this within time span, that I'm like, I'm gonna take my time. I don't want to miss anything over here. Yeah,
and I appreciate that. It's I love games like that where you, like you said, you can genuinely get lost. You're supposed to go do an objective, and that conversation at that objective could take 10 minutes, but I'll get to it when I finish spending 2 hours fighting this Alpha Lopunny. I'll get there eventually.
Just creeping around the Alpha Snorlax and just, all right, I need to position myself at the top of this little cliff here, and I'm going to try and throw a ball at its back, wait for it to turn around, Well, it's not turning around yet. Wait for it to turn around. I feel like the concept of a stealth Pokemon game, or one where you can just actually not necessarily have to engage in battle to catch Pokemon, is something that fans had talked about for ages. And to get it there, obviously not perfect, but there were times where it felt outright like Assassin's Creed, where I am creeping around just waiting for this AI to take this certain path, turn this certain way, so I can, well, not quite backstab them, but throw a Pokeball at their back in this case. And just certainly not a perfect game, but I was delighted at how experimental the Pokemon Company let themselves be. That would I ever want to see the strong style, I forget what the quick style, the turn-based
strong and agile,
the strong and agile style battle mechanics in mainline games? No, I feel like that would probably be a bit too radical to put in a mainline game. But I'm really happy to see them try something like that in a spin-off, because that's the place to do it. That's the place to get really adventurous and have us learn new things, try new things, and that should be hopefully the testing grounds for things to eventually get to mainline. Do I expect Strong and Agile to ever get to mainline? No, but obviously
I hope not.
That's where they started to at least experiment with overworld things, with open world mechanics. And my guess is that the development of Legends Arceus was still overlapping very significantly with Scarlet Violet, such that they probably couldn't actually adjust too many things based on feedback. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what they change in ZA, and also just how they're going to implement an entire game within a singular city.
Yeah, that's going to be huge. I'm really excited about that. And I agree with you. I think that this is a very good game, but you're absolutely right. That's basically what happened, right? They had to split the team in so many directions that's why they had to hire Ilka to make BDSP, because they just didn't have the hands on deck to do all those things at once. So it was a little rushed, which is why certain things came out the way they did.
When Pokemon were in the distance choppy, yes, but at that point, it doesn't necessarily look great in a trailer, but as long as the frame rate's fine when I'm actually in playable distance from them, fine. I'm going to be a little bit forgiving there. I would hope they can get that level of polish, because, I mean, gestures broadly to Hoyoverse and what they're able to do with their money. I'm going to be understanding to a point, and obviously the game is still incredibly fun. And that choppy frame rate for Pokemon in the distance and questionable pixel counts aren't going to ruin the game.
Yeah,
but
no, I agree.
The broader complaints regarding the Pokemon Company's output in the past couple years are well documented, and they've said supposedly that they're going to be adjusting their release cadence and that they are aware of these things. That obviously they have to be aware. They're not completely deaf and blind, but to what degree are they necessarily incentivized to do things? Because, well, Scarlet and Violet was the single best-selling console exclusive release ever, so warts and all, they're not necessarily going to be getting that hard-hitting incentive to fix things. I hope they do. But,
yeah, we're at a weird point with those guys. We're at a really awkward point. Like, as you said, you're absolutely right. They did acknowledge, they're like, yeah, this is coming a little rushed. they acknowledge it for sure. And that's what's kind of scary to me, right? Is the amount of people they have working for them, the schedule they've put on themselves on purpose, and what they want from a game means that, scarily enough, what happened to Sword and Shield, or what happened to Legends Arceus to some degree, or Scarlet and Violet, is, unless they make a big change soon, it's going to keep happening for a hot minute. And like, they acknowledged that after Scarlet and Violet came out. So whatever the hell is happening for Gen 10, at this point, the lasagna is already in the oven, right? Like, they can't go back and change those mistakes unless they want to delay that game. And we know they don't want to do that because that game's supposed to drop on the anniversary. So it's like, on one hand, I'm looking forward to it and I will buy the game because I love Pokemon. On the other hand, as a diehard fan for a long time, I'm a little worried because I don't know if I can stop that train. I don't know.
Yeah, it's this very interesting tension as a fan that, like you, I'm an absolute Pokemon diehard, that I was in the target demographic for Gen 1. I've been along for the ride the entire time. And to its credit, one thing that I've always said as a defense of Scarlet Violet, that all of Scarlet Violet's problems were aesthetic. That every one of those glitches was overworld things. That in battle, for all of the crazy glitches and weird things that people got clips of, none of it was ever in battle. It was always on the overworld. And at the end of the day, that doesn't matter as much. Does it matter? Yes. But the fact that they put out just think of all the variables in the Pokemon battle system. Abilities, natures, all of the different stats, all of the different moves, all of the different abilities, the odds of some combination of things acting up and getting an error, conceivably should be pretty high. I don't think there's been the type of thing where, if you have this Pokemon use this move against that Pokemon with that nature, game crashes. I haven't heard of that in any Pokemon game ever. Their battle system is, like, I hate to say it, flawless.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be, right? Yeah.
But the ironic part is, okay, if you can get all that technical stuff, I know it's not a one-to-one comparison of getting the code right in a battle system versus what you're doing in terms of rendering an animation, that those are very different mechanical code processes.
Right.
But, I'd like to have my cake and eat it too. I'm sorry.
Right. No, I totally get that. Yeah, I think that I think you're absolutely right. I truthfully, for me, those don't ruin the games for me, right? Like, I'm not gonna enjoy the beautiful story that was, in my opinion, Scarlet and Violet and go, yeah, that was cool and all. That tree in the first area sucked, so the game gets knocked down a peg. That's just, I don't know. That's just not the kind of guy I am. I think that's part of the, truthfully, I think that people coming to social media to make those kinds of remarks are part of the reason why Scarlet and Violet, not that it looked bad, right? But like, part of the reason why it looked the way it did. I mean, they look at that stuff, they watch people pour their heart and souls, developers pour their heart and souls into Sword and Shield, and then they show it to us and like, look guys, you like this? And then we're all like, no, we hate it. And it makes them feel bad and it makes them rush to do changes and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that stuff gets to people for sure.
Absolutely. Congratulations, you've been hired on as a project manager at the Pokemon Company, and you've been given a nominally infinite budget to develop a non-mainline game.
Ooh.
What would you like to make? It could be a remake. It could be a full-on revamp. It could be a sequel, new edition in a spin-off series. It could be a new spin-off series. What would you want to make? that isn't a mainline game?
Ooh, that's tough. Two things about that. I think number one, it depends on what you consider Arceus, because for me, I don't think of it as part of the main line. It's an amazing game.
I don't consider. Yeah. When I say mainline, I mean the generation split 2 games with box legendaries, and basically anything else is a spinoff. Legends is absolutely a spinoff.
Yeah, I agree. It's a conversation and a debate I've had several times. So I'm like, I want to make sure someone. But yeah, for me, it's a side game, and I really, you had mentioned it earlier, and I was something that I was happy to talk about, because you're absolutely right. At least for me, right, I'm a competitive Pokemon player. I love VGC. I watch all the events. I compete myself to some degree. I love battling. It's so cool, right? Battling is sick, but there are 1,000 plus Pokemon. I think exactly 1,025 to be specific, and they're all written with so much personality and this and like, even in Arceus, you got to see a little bit, because like they would code behaviors into Pokemon. Like, for example, if you fell around a Blissey.
Down to the way that they move, that
yes,
certain Pokemon wobble because of just the shapes of their bodies, and you don't get to see those little intricacies and physicalities in normal gameplay, because they're usually just sort of having their standing idle animations.
Yeah, exactly that. And that's the point I was trying to bring it to, is I want a game more like that. Legends Arceus was amazing. I'd almost give it a 10, but we have so many games right now and so many formats in which you can battle. So I think one of the few things we don't have are games where we get to just, like we did in Arceus, research Pokemon, see how they are in the natural habitat, how they behave with each other, how they react to us. I would like a game that, like, if I could make another game with that budget, I would dial the battling in Arceus back by as dramatic as even like 30 or 40%.
To be honest,
and then make
there wasn't even that much battling in Arceus.
There wasn't. There wasn't. There was maybe, 6 trainer battles that were seriously important to the story. Maybe more or less. But you're right. Yeah. I'd like it. I'd love a game that's specifically about research, and sure, if you have to battle, like God forbid you're being attacked, if you have no choice, then you battle. But other than that, I'd love it to just be about research. I think it'd be so much fun, because games like, I don't know if you've played the newest Pokemon Snap, have you?
Yes.
Yeah, super fun. And like, that's a game like that. You can see so much personality in like a Score Bunny running along or a Bouffalante sleeping. And I don't think we get a lot of chances to let those personalities shine. So I'd love more of that.
Yeah, and just to be able to actually properly traverse things that, don't get me wrong, I love Pokemon Snap. It's very, very fun. But the fact that you're on rails, not able to actually go around in the environment and explore and wait and see things. But you can do that in Legends. That I definitely see where you're going with this. And that definitely sounds fun, of just a proper research game. And that, you can still write a very interesting storyline of, okay, you probably have a rival researcher who's trying to get data as fast as you, but also in your research, you could end up discovering some crazy conspiracy plot by insert villainous team here, that you could still have the entirety of really any Pokemon's storyline and have it with non-battling.
Yeah.
And just, that would be really, really interesting. And I'm wondering how much they will lean into that when it comes to Legends ZA. That will they increase the amount of battling versus what they had in Arceus? Will they reduce it? Will it be about the same? We're going to see on that, but I think that would be a very, very interesting concept, and that we've had different approaches to it, because, like you mentioned, we've had Snap, we had, dang it, I'm blanking on it. It was Pokemon Ranch, I think. And just different things, even in the mainline ones with the campsite, but to have that be the crux of a game would be really, really cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that they add things like that to main game, but too. I don't think it should be the main focus, is like me giving my Chansey a bath. There should be more to it than that. But I think it's cute when the mainline game sprinkles in a little bit more detail or personality, or lets you like in Gen 6 when you played games with your Pokemon. That's cute,
Yeah. Oh, gosh, I literally could talk Pokemon all day, and just
I really could.
The number of things that I'd like to see, the number of things I've enjoyed in the past, the number of just, there are criticisms among it.
Yeah.
But that's what has pushed Pokemon from being what many said back in the early 2000s. Oh, it's going to be a fad.
Yep.
And here we are with it as the highest grossing multimedia franchise in history. Pikachu is one of the most recognizable fictional characters in the world.
Yeah, it's true. It's so funny that you say that, because when I was a kid, based on how old I was when I was born, I started in Gen 3. I loved the games, went backwards, then went to go play the rest of them. And there was a time in my life where Gen 5 was coming out, like Black and White was around the corner. And as a kid, I didn't know how long the game was going to last. I was surprised I had gotten 5 of these. So in my mind, for some reason, as a child, I was like, if Black and White's the last Pokemon game, I had a good run. I just thought that was it. Like, I was just going to enjoy it, put it down, and the franchise was over. But I was so wrong, and I'm very glad that I was.
Do not cite the old lord to me. I was there when it was written. I was there in Gen 1 when Blue and Red.
Oh, hell yeah.
And I didn't get Blue or Red, but I had a lot of friends that did. But I got Pokemon Yellow for my 7th birthday.
Nice.
And that I played that. Silver is the one that I put in probably more hours than anything else. The Gen 2, just the amount of time I spent exploring those areas, even after the mainline game was done. Do I think it's the best design game, especially when it comes to overall level? Definitely not. But the environments, the music, and the incremental improvements from Gen 1 and 2 are so staggering. Just held items, reading time of day.
Yep. Oh my goodness.
Gen 2 was that for me. And then Gen 3 came out, and I didn't have a Game Boy Advance. So I couldn't get Ruby or Sapphire. And I sort of fell off of the anime. So I was basically about to fall out of Pokemon entirely. And then I was getting ready to go on a trip with my family where we were going to be in the car for a while. So I wanted to pick up a game, and I had gotten a Game Boy Advance relatively recently, and Emerald has just come out. I was like, oh yeah. Well, Pokemon, I loved it for 3 years, and there's this one, and it's effectively the yellow of this generation, so yeah, I'll pick it up. And then it was all over. Then there was no looking back, and there has not been anything significant that I've missed since then. That I'm not the type to buy all 3 versions. I usually just buy one and done, that I'm not completing the Pokedex. I'm just, playing through the main line, playing through the post-game bosses and such. But that most Pokemon games I'm getting on launch day, and that I've played through all 9 generations, and that I'm just so happy to see that kids nowadays still get to grow up with Pokemon like I did.
Yeah. That's so big.
Who cares if it's perfect? That for some kid, Scarlet Violet was the first Pokemon game they ever played, and it's perfect. And it is going to be in their memories forever. It is going to be the thing that they remember sinking in however many hours, having their adventure, saving the world, and just they get to have that. And that it's weird to think there was this sort of night before Christmas magic that I was thinking about the night before Scarlet Violet came out. Of just, for all the years and all the games, there's only been really effectively 8 of those night before Christmases, because I'm not counting before Pokemon Blue and, well, what would have been at that point Red and Green launched, because nobody knew it was going to be at that point. But that it was a very special night of just, people waiting to pick up those games, and that first day of people exploring. And some folks were a bit disappointed, but just there's still that magic, and those days don't happen very often. And I'm looking forward to 10th generation, that for whatever reason, the fact that we use a base 10 counting system and have adopted that as humanity, does it actually mean anything? No. But does it mean something? Yes. To hit 10 generations, that's 20 years, 25 years was a big thing. I feel like the Gen 10 celebration will probably be bigger than the 25-year celebration. And Pokemon Company, please, it doesn't have to be perfect, but please get it right. Please.
It's probably, it's something I've widely regarded as, quote unquote, the only time I'll ever be disappointed. And I've talked a lot about Pokemon, and like you said, you're right, Gen 10 is important. The anniversary is important. This is like for everything they've done so far as a company, this is a big deal. They've had a lot of big deals before, but this is a big deal. And I'm usually super forgiving, right, when it comes to Pokemon, as long as at its core, I genuinely feel like I played a Pokemon game and a good one. If that's all you accomplish at your core, chef's kiss. That's a 10 for me. But this is the first time in my life where I'm like, oh, this is really important to me and millions of other people. That's really good.
There's a level of expectations, and especially on the tail of Scarlet Violet, which a lot of people weren't entirely satisfied with. That you're having to sort of push back against that while also delivering on a very sentimental occasion.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I brought it up prior, but it's really important to me, and it's frustrating because it's something that I think is what's skewing us as a whole. I think that Pokemon fans also growing up and getting cell phones and then going on social media, and now I'm not saying they weren't receiving feedback and criticism before, they were, but now a lot of us are growing up and we have a lot more access to Twitter, so we're saying a lot more things about their game and a lot more things that are negative. And sometimes the public perception of Pokemon fans, the way we treat the developers, I really genuinely believe that it's going to alter the games going forward, because I feel like what I mentioned before, it's Sword and Shield, Sun and Moon, the way that they gave us those games and then we went on social media and tore them apart, man, just inch by inch. I feel like they look at those things and then they make changes based off of those things, and that's why certain things come out the way they do in Pokemon. And it kind of scares me because it's like, well, damn, because of social media, I think the way we're going to receive these games forever will be skewed, for sure.
That's an interesting thought, and I don't entirely disagree with it, that just in general, feedback, especially via social media, is something that companies have to take with a grain of salt. That voluntary feedback will statistically always skew negative, and especially on social media, that people are just going to always be much harsher than they would under normal circumstances. And I deeply, deeply, deeply sympathize with any community managers that have to deal with that. Just, I certainly wish that people would give feedback in more constructive and less vitriolic ways. I'm sad to say that it's probably too much to ask, but I hope that there can be some balance of criticism and feedback that is taken and is actually useful, and that things can actually be made in a way that is healthy and innovative, and also actually taking into consideration feedback. But it is certainly an iterative process.
Yeah, it's a lot. I think, for me, I think the one that, like, honestly, I got a pretty thick skin, but the one that probably hurt my feelings the most is, I think, like, it was either when Sprigatito had quote unquote leaked or had officially been announced, and it was really adorable Pokemon, great grass starter. Oh, that thing's cute. We should all be excited to see it. And what bothered me was that day, social media was just filled with, oh, that's cute, but I hope that stupid thing doesn't stand on two legs. And I was like so shocked that everyone felt that way, and I'm like, we just got like this adorable,
I can. That's a really good example of valid feedback and criticism delivered in a bad way, because I think the crux of it is a lot of people see this really cute quadrupedal cat that, like you said, people agree pretty much universally. Yeah, that thing's super cute. And that, historically speaking, we see the trend that a lot of these starters start quadrupedal and then become bipedal, and doing so actually become less cute. And saying, I hope that they break this precedent of theirs and go with this type of design. Like that, the phrasing and the way that people did it was just very, very harsh.
Yeah, and that can, like, and for example, you're talking to a brand new artist about the way they're drawing a human or a hands or whatever, and it's about the way you tell them, oh, hey, like, this could be done better, or like you could do this, or you could augment it in a friendly way that isn't saying that thing sucks. And I know it's a giant billion-dollar company and not some person trying out their first drawing, and it's very different, but those are still people at the end of the day. They're still behind the computer. There is a human being who designed Sprigatito, Florigato, Miascarada, who has to read all these things online about their character who they were previously proud of. And I think that can alter how these games come out in the future.
Yeah, and that it can't be easy.
Yeah,
and
gotta be tough.
If nothing else, I feel like Pokemon design over the years has actually maintained a really high quality bar. That some people say, oh, you made a keychain, a Pokemon's like, well, no, Gen 1, we had a literal Pokeball, a blob of sludge, we had a bird. They've been doing pretty good for having 1,025 things.
Yeah.
The fact that so many of them, yes, you're going to have some that are similar and overlapping, that you're always going to have your regional bird and whatnot, but that's also kind of reflecting real life. Birds exist in most places on the planet, and most birds in most places on the planet look relatively similar, but that they have these little variants, and you are, but that, there's been a lot of really, really creative designs and ones that have become very beloved, even the newest ones. So that's something that has been very exciting to see, and that who knows what we're going to get in Gen 10.
Yeah, I don't know. It could be something crazy. I think you're absolutely right. We get our very fair share of what the heck is that thing versus like, oh, that's just a dog. And I think that's okay. Like you said, I've lived in New York for 27 years. There are pigeons. That's why there's a pigeon Pokemon. Yeah, stuff like that.
Well, I know I could probably just spend the entire show on Pokemon, but I do want to get to a couple other things. And just, one really interesting thing you had mentioned to me is you, as I do and many others, enjoy anime, but that one of your favorites and one that you actually make a point to do an annual watch of, which very few people do annual watches of anything, that it takes a very special series or a special piece of media, whether it's a movie, a book, or an anime, to say, I'm going to specifically set aside time to watch this regularly, and even more special if you have it on a schedule. And that you watch Soul Eater every year. You mentioned specifically around Halloween, which obviously the timing there makes plenty of sense, that it is a very Halloween-coded show in many, many, many ways.
Yeah.
But, Soul Eater, fortunately, is not a super long series, but it's not insubstantial either. It's 51, if memory serves. And it's also one that doesn't end in the anime the way it ends in the manga. So, for starters, have you read the Soul Eater manga?
You know what's funny? I've actually never taken the time to do so. I started the tradition so long ago, and I just kept rewatching it, and I know there's a difference. I know. I just like... if I may be honest for a second, because I do read manga as well, right? I've got a whole shelf there, so it's not like I'm ignoring all manga. I think I'm just specifically ignoring Soul Eater. How do I explain why I've been ignoring manga? I think for me, I watched Soul Eater pretty young, and it influenced me a lot, and it was so important to me, and it means so much to me as a human being. That's part of why the tradition started. And I think there's a tiny part of me that's like, I know the manga changes the ending and a lot of other things. And I'm like, I don't know.
For the series as it is, it's so special as it is that in some ways, reading the manga might taint it.
Yeah, and that's truthfully, like, maybe it's an irrational fear, but you're absolutely right. That's part of what I'm kind of worried about. I look at it every year. I'm like, Riri, maybe this is the year you read instead. And I'm like, I get all scared. Yeah.
Now, you said, obviously, it's a very meaningful series to you, that it was something that resonated you, pun half intended, on a very deep level.
Yeah.
Was it something that just right off the bat, episode 1, you're all in, and that you could feel that there was something special about this series, or was it something that perhaps hit you halfway or even near the end? That obviously, episode 1, you enjoyed it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you realized it was something that was going to be this level of impactful. Where along the line did you realize how much you loved Soul Eater?
That's wow, that's a great question. I don't know. That's there's a bunch of different answers to that. I'll try and give you the easiest one. I think for me, immediately, I'm a big art guy, I'm a big music guy. So like hearing the soundtrack, hearing the opener, the ending, looking at all the visuals, the art, etc. I was like, whoa, the character design, I was blown away. And as I was watching and it got past that. Because when you see anime or read a manga for the first time, you're like, wow, I like this because it's cool. And then maybe later on the depth develops. And that's what happened to me. At first I was like, oh, this is cool. And then like you learn more about Soul and Maka, and you learn more about Black Star. And I think that's part of what really got me, is like not just Black Star, not just being this cocky, confident dude, and like there's so much more depth to that character. And that combined with when you finish the show and you lean back in your chair and you're like, whoa. So I think for me it was the beginning, middle, and the end, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. And from what you just said, I'm guessing that Black Star is your favorite character?
Oh, for sure. I love that guy so much. I thought, I don't know, I'm a sucker for characters like that, where you meet him for the first time and he's this dumb little goofball, right? But like when you really dissect the character, he's so much more than that. And like behind the silly little demeanor, he's a super strong guy, like just genuinely. As a, like, not, I guess as a fighter, yeah, but also as a human being, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is there a particular arc or fight that really stood out to you that did, you know, this is a pretty classic shonen battle anime and that it's incredibly high quality. For anyone out there, if you've not watched or read Soul Eater, go watch Soul Eater. Like you said, the animation quality, the soundtrack in that show is incredible. Holy cow.
Good.
It's,
yeah.
I own the physical soundtrack from that one. It's really, 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 really good.
Oh yeah, it's a banger. And there's nothing bad. I can't think of a single bad moment in the show. I think for me, God, it's so hard to describe this scene. Goodness, I think the easy answer is Maka's final fight. But other than that, it's not even a moment where necessarily where Black Star fights, right? Where he's in the town and everyone around him is like throwing crap at him and being a piece of crap to him. And he's just kind of taking it. And it's where you first kind of see that depth to him, in my opinion, and you realize the kind of person he is underneath who he is. And it stood out to me because usually fights stand out to me, like Naruto Sasuke Final Valley or stuff like that. But this wasn't. I guess it was a fight, but not really. It was kind of getting his ass kicked. It was so like, I was like, wow, that's I don't know, that's just a quote unquote good person, right? Obviously, anime character, cartoon person, but I was like, wow, that's a good guy right there, you know?
Yeah. For me, gosh, I made the terrible mistake of asking a question I didn't necessarily have an answer to. And in my own defense, it's been a minute since I watched the series.
That's so fair.
Yeah. The one that has always stuck out to me of just a really memorable moment, not necessarily my favorite moment, but just the piano scenes in Soul's head and some of the moments where Maka gets particularly close to losing her sanity.
Yep.
And just the big discordant notes that you hit there and the way that the battle flows, and that you can tell not just from the music, but from the way that Maka moves, that you can tell that it's different, that this is not Maka as her normal self. And the way that they express everything and actually have people go properly insane in this show, and that you see people deteriorate. You see this with Stein and a bunch of others, but that you have the more proper arc with Maka, and that that's one that has always stuck out to me of just a very memorable fight. I don't know if I'd say like my favorite, but those moments are the ones that really, really stick out to me. And obviously just certain characters. Dr. Frank and Stein. What a guy. What a guy.
Ooh, what a banger. What a banger right there. That's good taste. Yeah, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I think that's for me too. Not just with Soul Eater, just in general. I think it's beautiful to see when a character is going through something in any sort of media, right? There's examples where it's just, they're going crazy, teehee, but like exactly like you said, there's so many little bits and pieces that let you know, quote unquote, something's wrong. And it's so nice to see them all come together, especially like, for example, with Krona, right? Like Krona is not, I mean, respectfully, no Soul Eater character is in the right mind, but like specifically Krona was being manipulated and going through so much, and like you could see them like breaking down the whole thing.
I have not read the Soul Eater manga myself, but I know that in the manga, continuing from where the anime leaves off, that Krona continues becoming a more and more integral character.
Yeah.
And that their arc and their mentality is something that becomes increasingly central to the plot. And it is because of Krona that I'm always sort of like, okay, if I'm going to actually go out of my way and do it, it's because I want to be able to know Krona's full story.
Right. Exactly that. And it's so, another thing I love about this show is, and the manga as well, obviously, is it's really nice to be able to have a piece of media like that that can check literally every box, make you laugh, cry, etc. I think it's so cool that even through all these serious moments and this gorgeous storytelling, they still find little pockets of time to make you laugh or be silly. Like, how in the hell they fit Excalibur into that show is still, I'm so impressed with that guy.
Icon.
From
the
such a
United
good
Kingdom, I'm looking for heaven, going to California.
He's so well written. It's so funny that
I don't know
such
if
a
I can call
weapon.
that thing well written. Well executed, perhaps. Well written, not necessarily.
It's so funny to me that the idea that this guy is so powerful and that whoever wields him becomes the greatest Meister, but no one wants to wield him because he's so annoying.
Such a pain in the ass.
So good to me. I love that.
They do. Well,
So
what a
funny.
real thing of, there's this person who's really, really talented, but they're just an asshole, or they're just really freaking annoying and nobody wants to work with them.
Yeah, I get it. And I loved it so much because every time I watch the show, I laugh because I think about it and I'm like, yeah, man, if I was a Meister, I couldn't do it either. I like to think that I could, but that guy pissed me off. I wouldn't make it a week.
No, and just, you have so many quirky characters that, yes, most characters in a well-written show are going to have their own quirks because that's what's going to give personality. That's what's going to be different about them. But Soul Eater, for a manga that is a battle shonen, I feel like its cast is actually relatively small, that it's not these sprawling multi-dozen characters that you have in Naruto and Bleach and One Piece, that you have your primary 7 and that you have a supporting cast, but that it doesn't spiral quite as much, at least not in the anime.
Right. Yeah, and that was big for me. It's funny enough you say that because as someone who Naruto's probably my number 2 or 3. I usually juggle between Brotherhood, Naruto, and Soul Eater. But Naruto's up there for me. And you're right, there are so many characters. There's so many people to care about in Naruto.
And to their credit, they do get you to care about them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Some of them aren't written well. Most of them are written pretty okay, and it makes you want to care about them. And in this, it's weird. Soul Eater's the exact opposite, and I still love that show too. I think it's because when there's only 7 important characters, you wind up spending almost every episode with one of them, if not all of them, and there's a closeness you feel, right, when you spend that long with a character and you watch them grow, etc. So in a way, I don't want to say they all have more depth, but it kind of feels like they do. No,
I feel like someone somewhere has probably actually calculated it out that you would naturally think, all right, fewer characters, that means each gets more screen time and therefore they are able to actually have more depth. But naturally, Soul Eater with 51 episodes is not going to be the same as Naruto initial with his, 200 odd, I forget how many, and then however many Shippuden has, and that does every character in Shippuden outside of the primary cast get the amount of screen time that the secondary characters in Soul Eater have, because there's fewer of them, but there's also fewer episodes. That I'm sure someone has crunched those stats, but that for the amount of time that we get with them, that generally people are given their time to shine. Some more than others, but that everyone is given the time of day.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the case. It's funny you say that, because even with Naruto, when we got to Shippuden, like in interviews and conversation, like Kishimoto was like, I gotta be honest, man, like the Neji scene or with Rock Lee, it got to a point where even he admitted, like, yeah, sometimes it's hard to write these characters. Sometimes it's hard. So like, there's even been instances where a character will have to pass away or get put to the side or etc. because I don't even blame him for that. You can't write everybody all the time.
We don't have the time.
Yeah.
Soul Eater is such an interesting one, and the fact that it's
Yeah.
been so beloved that even as recently as like a year ago, that there was some teaser art celebrating what I think was the 15th anniversary, and that it is up there on that list. We talk about Thousand Year Door and Coliseum of people waiting for remakes, that Soul Eater is up there on every time there is just even a breath of Soul Eater mentioned from any official source. Is this it? Are we getting the remake, or are we actually going to be getting the Brotherhood style remake of Soul Eater?
Yeah.
Because it's Studio Bones who did Full Metal Alchemist, and that it feels like one that is entirely logical to actually have that Brotherhood treatment. We've gotten a good number of similar reboots like that. We actually have it going right now with Spice and Wolf. We had Fruits Basket. We had Urusei Yatsura. There's been a good number, and you have to figure it's going to make money.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, you have the problem of, all right, is there licensing issues? What does it end up taking? Are you going to be able to reassemble the cast? Because that's one where they probably, barring extreme circumstances, you're going to do everything you can to just get the original cast.
Right. Absolutely. I would hope so. That's one thing I'm nervous about if that ever comes. There's so many things in media in general that deserve a remake or the Brotherhood treatment, and it's not like I do not trust the people in charge. Not at all. Not what I'm saying, but I get a little scared because sometimes those things are, like, to me, damn near perfection, and I'm like, oh God, what if I get my remake or my Brotherhood treatment or my etc. and it's less than perfect? Oh, I'm gonna freak out. God forbid.
I'm much more skeptical and worried about proper remakes than Brotherhood treatments, because when I say Brotherhood treatment, it's all right, you are one-to-one adapting the source material. You are not ending it early. You're not going off on your side stories and tangents and having to make your own ending.
Yeah.
And that you know what you're going to get from it.
Right.
So there's less variability in that, but certainly for if it's a reboot or remake where you're not going from source material that exists, that's when things get a bit more dicey.
Yeah, that's when it gets scary. I have faith, though. I think that I agree with you in that sense. Soul Eater is one of those things where, truthfully, I'm very, that show's very near and dear to my heart, but I would trust to my best ability whoever cooked that bad boy up. It would probably be exactly as you said, but God forbid some random studio got a hold of it. I'd still have faith. I get nervous thinking about it.
When you do your annual watch, how long does it take you to watch? Is it something that you spend the entirety of October just slowly working through it? Is it something that you just power through in a week, having like 10 episodes a day? How do you do that?
It depends. Every year is almost different. Most years, you're absolutely right. It's something that starts through October, and I try and, not always perfect, right? But I try and pace myself to the point where I'm probably watching the last couple episodes on Halloween, best case scenario. But sometimes it's a binge. Sometimes I take a break. Sometimes there was one year I got busy and I stopped halfway and I'm like, oh yeah, I got to finish this. It's tradition. Didn't come back till January. And then there was one year where I was having a rough mental health year. Took a whole week off of work. I'm like, just do it in one sitting. Yeah.
Yeah, and that I'm not surprised that you have some level of variability, that it being a 51 episode series, that you're not necessarily going to be able to actually schedule it out properly. It's not like it's a 12 episode one where, okay, I could just do this in a single day or watch 2 episodes a day for a week and actually schedule it out a little bit. But 51 episodes is so much. And I don't watch, or rather, I don't rewatch media a lot, and especially if it's something that's longer than 12 episodes generally. But Soul Eater's really up there, that even if I don't do a full and proper rewatch, I need to make time to go back and rewatch a couple of key episodes. Just watch like the 3 premiere episodes, those intros, the last 5, a couple in the middle with the madness and the pianos and everything. That it's interesting to think how few series are really like it. And that we have horror series, but it's clearly not a horror series, and
Right.
it's retained a lot of its originality and aged pretty well.
Yeah, it absolutely has. It's the kind of thing where if I had a friend that was saying, "Oh, I want to get into anime today. What would I do?" I could still, to this day, recommend Soul Eater.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll ever be able to not do that. I think I always will.
Yeah.
That's the best part about it. And I think truthfully, it's funny you mentioned the episode part, because that's part of the reason why the tradition exists. Is I love the show to death, but also it's feasible. Like, for example, I love Naruto to death, but I don't know if I
You
could.
couldn't do an annual rewatch of that one.
No.
Now I'm just sort of thinking about the series and how it ends up playing into things. Oh, also, have you seen Fire Force?
You know, that's a question I get all the time.
Well, there's a reason.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I know why everyone asks me that.
There's a punchline to this for those of you who don't know, I assure you.
Yeah, I know why everyone asks me that. Because every time I meet a new friend or I tell them about my tradition, they're like, "Oh man, well, you really love." And I feel so
yes
bad.
And no, that
I would.
Fire Force, it's very different. That it has similarities, certainly, but obviously the entire scenario is not the same. The entire world isn't functionally the same.
Yeah.
But it's still very good. I've enjoyed it. It is not complete yet. I think they have what would be effectively 1 or 2 more seasons left in it. I know the manga has ended, and it is also not too long. I forget how many episodes it is as of now, but it's running pretty similar in terms of episode count. That it's not too many. There's 48 episodes as of now.
Oh, wow.
And the story's not done, so my guess is that it would probably end up being somewhere in the 60-75 range. So longer than Soul Eater, but as far as I can tell, it would end up being a manga faithful adaptation from the get-go, and given where Soul Eater ended, if you were to do a manga faithful adaptation, it would probably end up being, I don't know if it's 1 or 2 more seasons from there, but a little bit over 51.
Yeah.
And for those who aren't aware, the reason that I ask, and that Wiwi has inevitably been asked this by many others, is that it's the same mangaka and that it is established very loosely to be in the same world. That you see the sun and moon, which have these very unique faces. That, at least as of where I am, and I am current on the anime, there is nothing remotely functional or otherwise important that pulls from Soul Eater.
Right.
It's just sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, smile. It's in the same world. Clearly not in the same era, but it's flavorful more than anything and incidental. That there's no requirement to read one to read the other. There's not even references to characters from Soul Eater in Fire Force, but that naturally, when you have the same manga and the same art style, that if you enjoyed one, that you will probably enjoy the other. Is it necessarily going to be that life-changing annual watch series for you? Probably not, but that it is certainly a solid show.
Oh yeah, I believe it. That's the that's the first thing I get told every time is to watch Fire Force, and I feel so bad. It's not Fire Force's fault. I think that nowadays, you know, there's I got like 3 different jobs, so when I go home, like maybe I watch an episode of this or I watch a friend stream. I feel bad. Shows like Fire Force get thrown into the pile, the watch list pile, but it's first in the pile, so it's next.
And I don't think the next season's been announced because it's been a minute, but it's certainly been successful enough that I do anticipate that they will eventually actually get around to it. And then
I hope so.
Maybe that would be the timing of once they finish Fire Force, maybe that's when they go back and do Soul Eater.
I wouldn't be opposed. I would not be opposed, that's for sure.
Now, that can be interesting. That there's so much that we do not know in terms of how and why anime production goes, of just what gets selected for adaptations first time around or remake. Oh, Leaf Sylvius in chat mentioned that season 3 did get announced recently. Okay, so
we're so back.
I anticipate that would probably end up airing either late 25, maybe early 26, because it does take a while to produce, especially something that high quality.
Yeah, exactly that. I'll wait.
The other one, and we talk about episode lengths and how much it would take to rewatch something. You are a big One Piece fan, but you have had a very specific way of consuming that series, which is unlike anyone else I've heard. But when you explained it to me, I was like, oh yeah, that I never even thought of it as viable, but that you've just played the games. And it's very normal that when you have a fighting game or a game based on an anime, that it's going to just trace you through a certain number of arcs, and that for One Piece, you were able to get through a significant chunk of the series just by playing the fighting games.
Yeah, it was such a funny moment for me. Because I had previously been a huge Ultimate Ninja Storm guy, and I know those because I like Naruto, so I know those games will drag you through the story in a pretty well written way. And I played Pirate Warriors just on a whim, and I was like, in theory, I was thinking about it because I was not caught up with One Piece, and I had played a Pirate Warriors game, and I was like, well, if they're gonna drag me through the story the same way Naruto does, if I just play all the games. And I think for me, I think if you have the cash, if you have the console, the PC, the hardware to play it, I think if you like an anime, 9 times out of 10, it's worth playing their game. Because Luffy as a character, I think is always well written, but Luffy didn't come alive to me until I got to, like, for lack of a better phrase, be Luffy in those fights. Like when you're fighting Crocodile and like you're not just watching the fight, like you're actually Luffy, like boxing that guy on there. It's so cool. Really brings the character to life for me for sure.
Yeah, and actually, I look at that one and say that's sort of a Dynasty Warriors. Actually, is it just a Dynasty Warriors system?
I could say
Bandai
that.
Namco. I think it actually is just built in the Dynasty Warriors system because it's made by Bandai Namco.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because when you bring those two together, I think about what you described the Dynasty Warriors system as, and I think about what I played, and I'm like, yeah, it is pretty similar. Funny enough.
And also just the names of Dynasty Warriors, Hyrule Warriors, Pirate Warriors.
Right, yeah,
in the face the whole time.
Oh crap, you're you're right. I didn't even think about that.
But there you go, and honestly, that probably mirrors the anime pretty accurately. That there's always just the faceless mobs that they're blowing through, and the only ones that are actually going to put up a challenge are Crocodile or the big bosses, and so just being able to pummel your way through in the game is going to be a lot more satisfying than watching either a still frame in a manga or watching the anime of seeing Luffy pummel a bunch of folks. So yeah, that's just part of the interactivity of games, of being able to actually embody that character, even if you're not necessarily making significant choices for them. The fact that you are able to, on some level, go through those experiences is naturally going to lead to you actually having a more in-depth, resonant experience with the characters and with the story.
Yeah, I think to some degree it actually, like you said, it puts the games put perspective to me on how strong the Straw Hats were. Because you read a section of the manga where the manga like shows you a panel of Luffy blowing through like 40 pirates or whatever, and you're like, oh, that's cool. But when you do the input in the game and you watch him literally take out 60 pirates, and you're like, whoa. I think that's what made it click. I'm like, well, this guy's cool.
Now, after beating the Pirates Warriors games, have you gone on and actually watched through the anime, or is that where your progression of the story ends?
To some degree, I'm caught up in the sense that I kind of know where everyone's power levels are and kind of where they are in the story right now. But I think it's weird. I think that doing it that way I kind of spoiled myself, because, God, I hate to bring myself to say the phrase, I don't know that I want to, but I think
after experiencing the story in that way, that going to the non-interactive medium might just not be the same.
Yeah, like whether you've watched One Piece or not, or how familiar you are, to some degree, the when Luffy turns Gear 5, that was like trending. There was everywhere. So like I watched the episodes right where he he shifts into Gear 5 for the first time. And I saw everything he did, and I thought it was so cool and it was so beautifully animated. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing, 10 out of 10. But all I could think about was like, I can't wait till I can play that.
How'd that play? How'd that play?
Yeah, exactly that. Like when you see all the like. And that's why I could go on forever about it, but like Gear 5 is so cool to me, but because like a lot of power-ups, I don't think I've ever seen a power-up that like almost just breaks the fourth wall, like Luffy's eyes bulging out of his head or coming through your screen, or he's literally pulling up the ground to block an attack like it's Tom and Jerry. That is so cool to me. So I would love to see that, like, and how it would play out like in a video game.
Yeah, and that it will probably take a while because there was actually a pretty big pause between Pirate Warriors 3 and 4, and 4 came out in 2020. So hopefully they'll get to 5, but the problem is if that's how you want to consume the series, you're probably going to be waiting a while to get to Gear 5.
Yeah, that's why I think that's why I say I think I cursed myself, because it's weird. I'm not a picky guy. I think that's probably the only time in my life I'd say I've been picky is where I've like almost to some degree turned my nose up at the anime, and I'm like, well, I'll experience this when it's in the game.
And then it's gonna be hopefully not 80 years later, but
oh god, I don't mind. I'll take it in shroud. I think I've noticed that like they do have gotten a longer gap in the time between games releases, especially with anime games like that. And I don't want them to rush it, because when you rush the game, that's what happened to the Jujutsu Kaisen game. And we all know how that game. Yeah. No disrespect. Yeah.
Anime game adaptations as a whole have varying levels of quality.
Yeah, I genuinely think I can write a thesis on what Ultimate Ninja Storm and Naruto as a whole, not just that part of the franchise, because Naruto's making video games prior to that, and I'm sure other anime games were, but for me, I feel like what Naruto specifically did, and yes, Dragon Ball Z has done it first and had more games and quote unquote done it better, but the arena fighter energy that Ultimate Ninja Storm gave off and gave to the fandom and gave to other shonens is something that people are still to this day trying to replicate and forcing down developers' throats to some degree. I mean, look at what happened to the Demon Slayer game. That was trying to be Ultimate Ninja Storm, and yeah,
you had that for My Hero Academia as well.
Oh, don't we start? Because I love My Hero to death. So when the game comes out, and you know how I feel about anime games, I was like, oh my god, yeah, it's time. And it was a game. It was a game they made. That's all I'll say about that.
And it wasn't the worst anime game adaptation of all time, but it was just for a title as big as My Hero Academia is right now, you would hope that it would be something. Obviously, Ninja Storm is a standout, so you're not necessarily saying it has to be that, but you want it to get close. Yeah,
and I think for me, like, I think in anything in this life, if you're choosing to, for lack of a better phrase, copy someone, if you're choosing to do that, for me personally, you better do it damn good. It's fine. I don't mind. It's okay. But it better be real good. So I know with games like Demon Slayer, or at least whatever the name of the Demon Slayer arena fighter is, the name escapes me. I saw it and I'm like, okay, if you're going to blatantly copy that game, you've got to be as good as it. And they weren't. So.
Yeah. And it's weird because arena fighters are so formulaic at this point that it feels like it should be a layup, that you're not trying to break the mold here. You don't even need to try to break the mold, that you just need to take these characters and just you could literally copy paste the inputs from any given game, whether it be Street Fighter, Ultimate Ninja Storm, whatever, and that you just put reskinned animations on and figure out, okay, this is the ranged fighter, this is the heavy hitter, and you could have the area of like frame effect and reach be exactly the same. You could just do 1-to-1 there, and it would be something that would be passable. And I almost think that some of these games are trying too hard to have something that is new and shiny and different and special, and they're undermining themselves in the process.
Yeah, I super agree. I think that it's like, for example, with Pokemon, I think there are a million monster tamer games. A million. All right. Well, some that copy Pokemon specifically, some that do their own thing, etc. And I don't mind if you choose to go the route, for example, of copying Pokemon. But if you're going to be a monster tamer game and you choose that as your media source to copy, you got some big shoes to fill. And that's kind of what they did with Demon Slayer. They had big shoes to fill. And some monster tamer hunter games do fill those shoes and like, oh, this is a good Pokemon clone. Cool. But if you can't do that, be prepared for what happens next.
But I also feel like it's much easier to make a good fighting game arena fighter
I
clone
agree.
than a Pokemon clone. That there's just it's a very standardized genre at this point. That yes, there are things that you can do to make it slightly different, but by and large, you don't actually need to reinvent the wheel or put in as much depth as is required to have a Pokemon clone or a monster catcher clone as you do to just make something that is, even if not Ultimate Ninja Storm, half step away from it.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why you're right. That's part of the reason why I judge them so harshly, is because there's so, like you said, it is a layup. So when you miss that layup, what's going on here, man?
But so it goes, so it goes. I do know that you actually have a stream coming up pretty soon, and I don't want to keep you too long. There's actually just a couple things I wanted to finish up on. First, I know you collect sneakers. Give me your favorite pair of sneakers.
Oh, that's a hard one because there's so many. I wound up unfortunately having to sell these. But there's a specific pair of Jordan 1s that are the LA Unions. And the reason I love those so much is when you like look up a pair of Unions, you're like, if you're not like a super involved sneakerhead, you're like, oh well, this is the same thing. Like, this is, why are you excited about this? But I think for me it was a moment because I used to, as opposed to going to like conventions for VTubers anime, I used to go to conventions for sneakers and fashion, and seeing those drop and seeing everyone panic and freak out and like this literal epitome of a holy grail, like that is, I don't know, to me that was really cool. It was really nice.
As someone who is not a sneakerhead, what made those shoes so special? What about them dropping made people lose their minds? Was it that you know, I know what Jordans are, obviously, that you know that's going to be the pinnacle, generally speaking, for sneakers, but was there something about these in particular? Was it an anniversary? Was the design something that had significance to it? Why was this one so important?
Yeah, I think the thing that is the most confusing as a former sneakerhead, because I used to create content based off of that, and now my world has changed. But that used to be an everyday occurrence for me. And the thing that always confused me the most about sneakerheads or fashion blogs or etc. is sometimes in the sneaker world, something was just popular. That's it. And like you'd ask or you'd look for more depth or you try to figure out why. And like Union LA was a celebration of the city and a celebration of the designers and the store and all of that stuff. And yes, we do appreciate and respect that. But a lot of the hype behind those shoes and a lot of shoes in the day was just like, yeah,
these look really cool.
These look cool. The blogger said it was rare. So if the blogger said it was rare, well, I gotta have it. That's what a lot of products wind up being. It's funny enough.
So you actually mentioned going to conventions for sneakers and fashion as a whole. Yeah. So was there a particular area of fashion that you were into apart from sneakers, or were you going to these other broader fashion shows seeking specifically sneakers?
Yes and no. I used to work with a bunch of buddies on my own clothing brand, so we would go and look for what pieces people were wearing. But for me, outside of that, like I do love fashion, but sneakers was always the main focus for me. Even when I would go to a con that was just about fashion, not about sneakers, I'd be looking at their feet and seeing like, hey, what is this guy wearing? Like, you know. Would
you ever want to have a pair of Riri shoes? There's lots of VTuber merch out there. There's 1,000,002 VTuber t-shirts and hoodies. I don't think anyone's actually made VTuber sneakers yet. And now that I think about it, that surprises me.
Yeah, that'd be cool one day. I think that for me, I think that all fashion tells a story, but specifically sneakers, I think they're really good storytellers, and they can show you if it's about a person or a movie or whatever, especially if they're designed right. Like, I don't know, I won't go off on a tangent about it, but the Miles Morales Jordan ones, beautiful storytelling, stuff like that. So I think it'd be cool to have my career or my story formed into this sneaker that winds up being a part of history. Yeah, that'd be cool.
Now, naturally, you'll need to find a producer, manufacturer, and whatnot, and that's that's the sticking point really for any type of merch. But this is a established industry. This is something that I feel like you could do that. Obviously, it would take time, and that you'd have to find the right partners for it. But I hope that one day you're able to do that, because I think that'd be really cool. And that, like I said, at least as of now, it's something that really nobody's doing. I wouldn't be shocked to learn, okay, there maybe been one somewhere that's done. I haven't heard of them if they have, but that right now, that's not where everyone's going. And one of the big things for VTubers, content creators as a whole right now is, what are you doing that's different? And that with sneakers being an area of interest and knowledge for you, that you didn't just enjoy them, but that you went to these conventions, you were being very aware of it, you knew the market, you knew the broader workings of it, past just being a baseline fan. I think that puts you in a position where you would be very uniquely qualified to actually know how to put out sneakers as your merch and to do it right.
Yeah, and thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's generally possible. I think the hardest thing about sneakers is the fan base and the people who are buying the sneakers in the community and all the people who will accept the sneakerhead portion. Sneakers are not like, how do I put this? If an indie company puts out an amazing video game, company you never heard of before, puts out a banger, 10 out of 10, everyone's gonna be like, wow, good job for this tiny company. This is amazing, huge. We all love this. But with sneakers, it's not the same. With a lot of sneakerheads in the community are like, yeah, man, if this isn't a pair of Adidas or a pair of Nikes, like, we do not care. So it's hard because you have to like be so good as a sneaker company and as a creator to put something up to people like that and make them compare you to Nike. And it's also just as hard to get the Nike deal. So it's rough, but it's doable. Yeah. Absolutely.
Would you ever want to potentially, you mentioned you had a broader fashion brand at one point. Would you ever want to do that specifically with VTubing, that there have been a couple other creators that have done broader fashion? Is that something you would consider doing again, or would you want it to be either sneakers or nothing, or is that just not of interest to you at this point?
I think the blunt answer is like, it wouldn't be opposed, but it would have to be something that could what's the phrase I'm looking for? Could keep me financially stable, haha. Because knowing what goes into it. I did that throughout college, right? So whatever free time I had that wasn't goofing off in class was me doing that, and it was a lot. So, and I was in college, living with my parents. I didn't have any expenses. I was a kid, right? But now it's like, okay, like I got a house, I got to pay this, I got to do that. So it's like, on top of having the time, I would also need to make sure it's, a financially stable venture. But if money wasn't an object, yeah, screw it, why not?
Yeah. Well, I hope you're able to find the time and the financially responsible way to do that, because certainly that is a lot. That being able to actually put together a brand like that, like you said, takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and that you then need to be able to actually sell enough units to make it viable and sustainable, because all the time that you're spending doing those designs and other parts are things that you could be doing, or time that you can be spending creating other content. And since obviously VTubing is going pretty well for you, that it becomes that trade-off. And perhaps there are certain elements that you can do on stream for certain designs and whatnot, but there's a lot of just logistics and management that really you can't actually make into content.
Yeah, there's so much that goes into creating anything. Even like early days of our brand, like a while back when we were just making hats, like even just making a silly little hat is a lot. So let alone all this other stuff. It's super cool, and I respect anybody who does it. I'd love to be able to do it one day.
Well, as we start to wrap up, I have two last questions that I ask all my guests. And the first is, do you have any goals for the rest of 2024? We are now into July, so a bit past the halfway point, but still a good chunk of time to do things. is there anything that you're hoping to accomplish, whether it be something that's metrics-based, project-based, just playing a certain game or finishing a certain series? Is there anything you want to do before we hit the end of the year?
That's a good question. If I'm being honest, I'm very grateful for this, by the way. But in the last couple months, I've been working really hard, and a lot of good stuff has happened to me. Stuff that I didn't think could ever happen to me as a creator. Even when you believe in yourself, like, oh, there's no way. All right. And a lot of it's happened, and now I'm like, oh my god, I've accomplished so many of my goals. I've checked so many things off my bucket list. For being honest, here in July, I'm left sitting here, and I'm like, what the hell do I do in July? So that's truthfully, that's kind of where I am. Is like, a couple months ago, all of the things that I'm like, wow, I would love to do this year. None of those were checked off, and now they're all checked off. So I'm like, okay, I guess I got to find a new thing.
Well, at the very least, that's a good place to be. Of the goal now is to find a new goal.
Yeah, I'm grateful for that, you know?
Yeah, and honestly, I'm kind of in a similar place that I've been also very, very fortunate to be able to accomplish a lot of goals, or just otherwise do things that weren't even necessarily goals, but, were cool. That if I had ever thought that it was even viable in the first place, I would have made it a goal, but then I wound up being able to do the thing.
Right.
And that I'm also in some ways like, okay, I need to figure out a thing. And that's very much separate of VTuber Talk. VTuber Talk is meant to be a sustainable and semi-predictable output, and to not necessarily be goal-driven, but iterative. And it is functioning as intended. But there's other parts of things that just, you can hit a point of, okay, wow, I actually did all these things, and that making sure you don't become entirely complacent or otherwise bored.
Yeah.
Because just having something to work towards means that you feel that little bit of motivation. It means that there's something that you're excited to try and accomplish. And that sometimes finding that goal is a goal in and of itself, of finding, all right, what is the thing that I want to start really focusing energy towards? And that's a very exciting time, but it's also kind of a scary time, because you have to evaluate, all right, is this something that is worthwhile? Is the goal attainable? Is the goal something that has a high probability of being achieved? Is this going to be a Mount Everest level project? Is this going to be a 2-3 month project, a year-long project? And figuring that out is going back to some of the things we were talking about at the top of the show, of figuring out balance and what you want, and just broader self-awareness to ensure that you don't burn out. Because one of the easiest ways to burn out is to give yourself a unrealistic goal.
Yeah, it's a super important tightrope that, as creators and anybody doing anything creative at all, has to walk. It's the combination between, like, okay, I always want to make sure either I'm chasing a goal or I'm working towards a goal, or et cetera, because that's, I don't know, how you give yourself continuity and how you don't burn out. By that same token, I always want to make sure I'm working, but I also don't want to make sure I'm always working. It's a super fine line.
Yeah. Well, I certainly wish you the best of luck on figuring out your goal, and then whatever the goal ends up being.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, genuinely.
And the last question I ask all my guests is, what does being a VTuber mean to you? And that's not the question of what does it mean to be a VTuber, but for you specifically, what does VTubing allow you to do, or what do you get from it? I've had people say, being a VTuber lets me get in touch with my inner child. It lets me be someone that I couldn't be in real life. I've had others have a more clinical approach and say, I love my model. I think it's really badass. I don't necessarily feel a deep emotional attachment to the model, but that as a performer, as a content creator, as an entertainer, the model lets me do things that make me, or let me do what I want as a entertainer that I couldn't necessarily do in other ways. And those are two pretty opposite ends of a spectrum, in that there's things in between and beyond. There's no one way that is wrong or right to be a VTuber. So for you, Riri, what does being a VTuber mean to you?
Oh God. Damn. There's so much. I think the first thing is for sure my OCs and the characters I've created, and like, you know, for some people it's just you're a cartoon person behind a screen, sick, and I respect and I appreciate it. I think it's dope too. I think however you VTuber is sick. For me, the characters I've written and designed mean a lot to me, so it's cool to be able to express them and live that out. And I think as a person also, when I grew up, I didn't have a sibling, I didn't have a lot of friends, I didn't have a lot of community, so I would sit there and I would watch creators, right? And I've always wanted to be able to give somebody else that space, right? To give somebody else a place where they can feel safe or talk about their favorite games or find a community. And being a creator and being specifically a VTuber has made that super possible. And I'm so grateful that I can give other people who like video games and like that stuff, for lack of a better phrase, a home when they watch my channel or they're part of my community. Because I know I didn't really have that at my age or when I first started liking this stuff until I found those creators myself. So it's really cool to do that.
I always ask that at the end of the show because it helps put a bow on things, but also it helps show, I suppose, consistency in some ways, and that for you and for the things that we've discussed over the past 2 hours, that the answers always make sense. So thank you so much for taking time out to be here. Thank you so much for just the incredible conversation. I know we could go much longer if left to our own devices, but you're actually going to be starting your own stream pretty soon. So I don't actually have to ask the normal question of who are we going to raid, because we're just going to be raiding you. So go on and fire up the stream so I make sure not to raid into something that isn't live.
Yeah,
For
absolutely.
folks that are watching,
so.
my guess is you're probably already following Riri. If for some absurd reason you're not, there's a shout out. Please correct that as soon as possible. And if you're at all interested, you can follow me here on Twitch and Twitter. It's just Vtuber Talk both places, and I do these shows about once a week. The schedule varies. I try to make sure that it works around the guest's availability, so I can't promise you something that is terribly consistent. So if you follow me here on Twitter, that way you'll be able to keep up with things. And speaking of which, thank you so much, Egg Slothy, for the follow. Really appreciate you.
Nice. Love that.
You're going to be playing some ZZZ, as we were talking about. So I might actually tune in for a bit of that just to sort of actually get a feel for it, because I haven't watched any streams of it yet. I've been very busy lately. So I know it's out, and I know that obviously a lot of people are hopping on that train. Well, I guess I couldn't say the train because that's Honkai Star Rail. That's a very different type of train.
Oh, what a callback. Yeah, good.
So once you're live, let me know, and I'll start setting all that up.
I am.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. Well, in that case, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. This is episode number 154 of Vtuber Talk. I'm Jay, that's Riri, and I will see you all next time, folks. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye, guys.